There's something quietly remarkable about people who grew up in the 1970s. You probably felt it long before the research caught up. If you came of age during that decade, your mind was shaped in a unique window of history that combined near total freedom with real responsibility, a combination that no longer exists. This is why you might look at the modern world with a kind of amused distance. You see the anxiety, the overstimulation, the tightly managed lives, and you recognize something lost, a childhood that can't be recreated. This isn't nostalgia for bell-bottoms or vinyl records. It's nostalgia for a way of being, a time when boredom wasn't a problem to be solved by a screen, but a space to grow into. That era produced a specific psychological imprint, not louder or softer, but sturdier. This is about understanding why you feel different, why certain things don't rattle you, and why silence doesn't scare you. Because what shaped you wasn't an accident, and the traits it produced are becoming rare. The first is something psychologists call self-directed problem solving, but you remember it by a much simpler phrase, one sentence that instantly changed your entire day. Go find something to do. You knew better than to argue, because if you complained you were bored one more time, you'd suddenly be folding laundry or cleaning the garage. So you learned, quickly. Boredom was your responsibility, not your parents'. That lesson rewired your brain. Your days weren't scheduled. You had to build your own sense of purpose from nothing. So you improvised. You disappeared into books for hours. You rode your bike with no destination, exploring creeks and wooded areas that had no name and no rules. You invented games, built forts, took things apart just to see how they worked. This kind of childhood teaches something modern environments rarely allow, how to create meaning in empty space. Today, boredom often feels like distress. For you, it was just a starting point, a blank page. It's why you don't freeze when plans fall apart. You weren't trained to wait for instructions. You were trained to figure it out. But that only explains your independence. It doesn't explain your unusual calm when things go wrong. That comes from the second trait. Psychologists call it adaptive risk calibration, but it came from something much simpler. You got hurt. You climbed trees that were clearly too high. You rode bikes without helmets. You played rough. And every scraped knee, every close call, taught your nervous system something essential. This kind of risky play teaches the body to distinguish between real danger and manageable risk. You weren't told, be careful, constantly. You learned what careful actually meant by feeling the consequences. Those scars weren't just injuries. They were data points, evidence that you could survive your own mistakes. So today, when a crisis hits, you don't panic. Your nervous system assesses first and responds second. You know the difference between discomfort and true danger. For many today, risk feels overwhelming because it's unfamiliar. For you, it was just part of learning. This combination, a mind trained to create meaning from nothing, and a nervous system trained to remain steady under pressure, is what created that sturdiness. It's a psychological footprint from a lost world, a world that made you resourceful when left to yourself and resilient when you fell. And in an age that fears both boredom and risk, that quiet strength has become your defining and rarest inheritance.
Another trait that quietly sets you apart is your comfort with being alone. Not isolation, not withdrawal, just a genuine ease with your own company. You remember long stretches of time without stimulation, hours spent in your room listening to a full album from start to finish, afternoons lying in the grass with friends, talking until the conversation just faded into a shared, comfortable silence. Long walks, bike rides, explorations when nothing was really happening, and that was perfectly fine. There was no device buzzing in your pocket, no constant stream of notifications pulling your focus outward. When things got quiet, your mind didn't panic. It turned inward. Studies on pre-digital childhood show that people who grew up before this constant connectivity have significantly less anxiety when left alone with their thoughts. Your brain learned early on that silence isn't a threat, that boredom isn't an emergency, and being alone doesn't mean being abandoned. In fact, modern experiments show something striking. When asked to sit quietly with their thoughts for just 15 minutes, many adults become so uncomfortable they would rather give themselves mild electric shocks. That probably sounds absurd to you, because stillness never felt dangerous. Your mind learned how to wander without collapsing, how to entertain itself without external input. This is why waiting doesn't bother you the way it does others. Long lines, quiet rooms, flight delays. These empty moments don't create agitation for you. They create space, and that space became depth. Before we continue, if you're listening and recognizing yourself in this, if this feels like someone finally put words to your experience, consider subscribing. This channel explores the psychology behind why certain people move through the world differently. If that matters to you, you'll want to stay. Now, there's another trait that quietly grew out of all this stillness. It's something psychologists call analog patience, the ability to wait without agitation and to remain steady when outcomes aren't immediate. It was trained into you every single day. You waited a full week for your favorite TV show, knowing if you missed it, it was just gone. You took photos on a roll of film and then waited days, sometimes weeks, to see if a single one turned out. You wanted to talk to a friend, so you memorized their number, called their house, and just hoped they were home. Waiting wasn't an option. It was built into reality. Research on delayed gratification shows that growing up where waiting is unavoidable develops stronger impulse control and emotional regulation. Your childhood wasn't optimized for speed, it was optimized for endurance. This is why instant gratification doesn't really impress you. You learned that anticipation is part of the pleasure. And it's why you stay steady while others get restless, constantly refreshing, checking, reacting. You're comfortable letting things unfold. But there's one final trait that ties all of this together, the foundation underneath your calm, your patience, your depth. It's how much freedom you were trusted with and how early. You left the house in the morning, and the only rule was clear: be back before the streetlights came on. No one tracked your location, no one checked in. Your parents didn't know exactly where you were, and sometimes neither did you. You rode your bike for miles, followed creeks until they disappeared, and crossed into neighborhoods you'd never seen before. And along the way, you made countless decisions without any supervision. That kind of freedom rewires a child's brain. Research shows kids who move freely without constant oversight develop stronger judgment and higher confidence. You had to assess situations in real time, decide who to trust, when to head home, when something just didn't feel right. And if you made the wrong call, you dealt with the consequences yourself. This is why, as an adult, you don't need constant guidance. You can plan and adapt without needing someone else's approval. You're comfortable taking responsibility. And this is often misunderstood today. Your independence can look like emotional distance. Your silence can be mistaken for disengagement. Your self-sufficiency can be read as coldness. But it isn't. It's competence.
If you've ever felt out of step with the modern world, this is why. It's not because you failed to adapt, but because you were shaped by conditions that no longer exist. The environment that forged you is gone, but the traits it gave you are not. That independence people label as emotional distance, it's competence. You learn to regulate yourself early. That comfort with silence they misread as withdrawal, it's depth. Your mind doesn't need constant noise. And that ability to wait, often mistaken for apathy, is pure discipline. You understand not everything demands an immediate reaction. You weren't overprotected or optimized for comfort. You were trusted to become capable. And despite what you hear today, that didn't damage you. It built you. You experienced a world where kids were both civilized and pharaoh, where boredom was normal and independence was expected. That world is gone, but the people it created are still here. If you grew up in the 1970s, drop a comment. Let others know they're not alone. And if you appreciate content that explains why you are the way you are, subscribe. This is just the beginning.